Hello, welcome to the channel. If you are new, welcome back. If you're returning, this video is all about quantum biology. I realized that Dr. Sara Pugh and I were both in two different groups, the Quantum Biology Collective, and also I realized we had both trained with Dr. Georgia Ede in ketogenic, whole food ketogenic diets for mental health. So I reached out to Sara and said, hey, how about if we have a conversation about quantum biology? We record it and put it on the YouTube channel. So of course she was game. And her background, so she's really interesting. Sara is a hypnotherapist. She's also a neuro Pilates teacher. I'm looking. Her undergrad was in biochemistry and genetics, and then her PhD is in molecular mechanism. So a really, really bright person, and just really, it's fun to talk to Sara because she knows a lot about a lot of things, particularly about healing. So it was a really fun conversation to have with Sara. I hope that you enjoy it. If you like it, please hit the like, give us a thumbs up, leave us some comments. Also, if you haven't already done so, if you would subscribe to the channel, that is very helpful. I appreciate that very much. And if you like this, you can find Sara. I'll put her information in the description. I'll put it in the description. And so that you can reach out to her, because she does do workshops. She works with people individually. So if you connect with her and you like that, you want to reach out to her, do some work with her. And I also have a quantum pro healing workshop that is a lot of fun, that is really practical. So all these things that we're talking about, quantum biology, I like to bring it together in a workshop where you can really figure out, okay, how does this work in my own life? So you get a deeper understanding of the importance of light and mitochondria and supporting our circadian rhythms, and then also nutrition. Just nutritionally, what does this all look like from a quantum perspective? And everyone who comes to that is on their own different spots in their healing journey. Some people are just curious and kind of want to see if they could feel even better than they already do, or they're after optimal health. And some people are coming because they have a significant health issue that they are trying to solve. Some of the people who come have trouble with sleep and digestion and mental health issues, those kinds of things. So people are looking for restorative sleep, for gut healing and health with their digestion. And of course, also reducing anxiety. And some people are on the anxiety depression roller coaster. So all of that information is helpful. Autoimmune stuff, like all different kinds of reasons that people come to that workshop. So if that's you, and if you're interested, I'd love to have you join for one of those workshops so you can check it out. So I hope that you enjoy quantum biology as much as I am enjoying quantum biology, and happy healing.
Okay.
Yay. So I am so excited to talk to you, Sara, because you're brilliant, which is really fun. But I also just really, I think I connect with how you communicate things. And so I thought it would be really helpful I really want to start sharing more quantum techniques with the world, because I think they're so powerful. So I thought we would start just by saying, like how you got into the whole world of quantum biology.
Okay, because it's quite a long story, but because I started off, I did a PhD and it involved biophysics. So I was exposed to very hardcore quantum physics a long time ago. But nowadays it can be easily translated to the layperson, because I did my PhD on fluorescence, so it was involving shining light at molecules. And I think what we're going to talk about today is shining light on people. But I think we're going to end up going on a journey that's going to cover chronic pain, addiction, food, hormones, weight. So I am a biologist originally, but I think now the old way is the biochemistry way, and we're going to move into the new way of how do we combine quantum physics, which sounds massively complicated, into daily life.
Yes. Yeah. How to, and also I didn't really realize that quantum biology was as new as it is. I mean, I think most people have heard of quantum physics and quantum mechanics, but not really understanding even what quantum biology is. So I thought we might talk a little bit about, like, what is that? What are we even talking about?
Oh, definitely, because I think quantum mechanics is much more mathematical, and people would be familiar with it in terms of electronics, like our iPhone. But I think quantum biology, we can look at it, we can think about it by looking at the body as maybe electrons, protons, and very small things that are subatomic, which sounds sort of a bit out there, but it actually makes a lot of sense. And it's very easy for lay people to understand if we explain it in the right way, because a lot of lay people have heard about we should stand on the earth and ground, but they don't know why. And then we hear a lot about acidity and being acid, or hydrogen water, or deuterium depleted water, and that's to do with hydrogen. So I think that's how we can convey it to lay people, but also have to remember that light is part of quantum biology as well, and light is one of our biggest timekeepers. And also we can have junk light, same as we can have junk food. So I think it's just being aware that our diet is not just the food we take in, but it's everything else: sound, light, and then invisible forces. Because I know some people may think that EMFs are woo-woo, but if you look at it from a biological level, every time there's a new development in electronics, whether it's 2G, radio, 3G, 5G, there's all of a sudden some surge in illnesses. And I think it's things like chronic pain, chronic fatigue, mental health, autoimmunity, stuff that people are quite familiar with. And we all know somebody that has one of these conditions, and they seem to just come out of the blue. So that's where it would relate to the lay person, because luckily with quantum biology, even though these forces are very, very small, we do have a lot of control over them. And it's more about just being aware of these invisible forces that are shaping our lives. But luckily we can do something about it. Then for the people that are more interested in spirituality, that side, I'm also a hypnotist, and I've done hypnotherapy for 10 years, all sorts of stuff, including past life regression. And there's still things which completely bamboozle me of how it works. So hopefully we can cover quantum biology from practical things like light and food, but also from a more sort of psychological side and an energetic and spiritual side as well, so everybody can be included.
Yeah, well, I definitely, of course, I'm super excited about that. I also got certified in hypnotherapy, brain-based hypnotherapy, but really it didn't turn out to be my mode of working with people, but I'm super fascinated. I've done past life regression work personally, and all of that is it's just fascinating. So yes, but let's start. Where do you want to start? Where do you think it would be most helpful? I think, I was thinking light, because I think light is the missing piece for people. And a lot of people have changed their diet. I feel like diet is important, but it's kind of low hanging fruit for people. And they think, oh, I need to change my diet. But most people don't think about their light and light environment. But we can start anywhere.
Yeah, that's really important, because I've worked with a lot of people, including myself, and you micromanage your micronutrients and drive yourself berserk. But when it comes to timekeeping, there's like a hierarchy, and there's hierarchies all the way through the body, and light comes above food and temperature when it comes to setting our body clocks. So that's one aspect that's important, because a brain that can't tell the time doesn't know whether it's meant to be burning fat, sleeping, making hormones, making serotonin. So basically light, we can look at it as a timekeeper, and we're talking about the timekeeper as the sun. So the sun's nothing dangerous. It's not trying to kill us or anything like that, like some people think. It's bad science. So to get it very basic, say if we wanted to teach our brains how to tell the time, we need to go outside in the sun as much as possible to keep reminding it. But there are certain times which are really important, like sunrise, just after sunrise, say in the morning with the UVA, and then sunset. And if people can't manage to get out or open their windows, those would be the key times. So that would be using light to help our brains tell the time. And it's far more important than people think, because it's a massive stressor to our nervous system if we don't know where we are and we don't know what time it is, because we've got to bear in mind our brains and mitochondria are inside us, and they can't see on the outside, and they're completely dependent on us going outside and getting messages from the sun. The other really important about light is that 43% of the light from the sun is red light. So it means every mitochondria on the planet somehow is able to get red light. And it doesn't matter about clouds, the red light will still get through. And as people may or may not be aware, there's an explosion in red light therapy, and there's vast amounts of research on that. So we've got sort of the healing side of red light as well. So on the contrast to that, blue light isn't anything nasty. It's just in excess. And when it's artificial, say from a computer or a laptop or a phone or something like that, because it's just one wavelength that blasts people, and it makes their brains think it's 12 noon in the middle of the summer solstice. So if it's, say, the 5th of December in the UK, and your brain thinks it's the middle of June at 12 p.m. So here we are talking sort of, well, I'm at 5 p.m. It would be massively confusing to my biology. So that's the problem with technology, is it's nothing bad. We have to embrace it, but we've got to bear in mind that the light that comes out of the screens, as much as we love it, is messing up how well our brains can tell the time. And for people that are interested in addiction and dopamine, the blue light from the phone is another thing which is going to overexcite our dopamine system, and that can lead into other addictions, or pave the way to other addictions, or enhance other addictions that people already have.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's important, like red light everybody thinks they need a red light panel. And I just want to point out that red light is available all year round outside from dawn to dusk. And so just getting people outside, I love my red light panel, but I also think it's just helping people, and also understanding that they're LED lights. So just even if they're off of screens, if all the lights are on after sunset in the house, and the body's still going to be confused and think that it's daylight, and it won't be making, melatonin, and you won't be signaling the other things that need to happen.
Oh, absolutely. That for some people, they do purchase red light panels, but for everybody else that is minding their dollars and pounds and euros, there's, as you just said, there's plenty of red light available, but also we've got something at the other ends of the spectrum. So we've got infrared and ultraviolet. So they're just wavelengths of light that we can't see. And obviously infrared is to do with heat, and you can get that from cuddling your partner, or having a sauna, or having your cat sitting on you. And also our buildings do produce a little bit of infrared, but it's just to let people know that if they see the prices of a red light panel and it's not within their budget, not to panic. There's way around it. Right,
exactly. Yeah, that infrared is, and I thought it was really fascinating that it's the infrared that's so important for our mitochondrial to expand that exclusion zone water. We haven't talked about that, but that infrared, I knew it was important to get red. I didn't realize that the infrared was so important for gut health and for all of these other things, for our mitochondria and such.
Oh, definitely. Because the thing about red light and then infrared is infrared can penetrate deeper, about 8 centimeters into the body. Right. So that's how it can get into the brain or the tissues and stuff like that. Whereas the red light itself is more about 2 centimeters. That would be to do with rashes, skin conditions, and more surface kind of problems. So that's where the difference is. And we can't see infrared, but we can sense it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess I thought of infrared being it's not visible light, but next to red. And I think I was thinking it needed to be daylight, but infrared isn't about daylight.
No, but it's present all the time when in conjunction with the sunlight, because the sun contains a spectrum. So we would just call it the electromagnetic wavelengths or spectrum, and visible light we can see, but then we've got infrared and UV light at the other ends of the spectrum that we can detect, and insects and animals can detect, so we can't necessarily see the far infrared, because we've also got near infrared as well. But I think, I suppose, for the simplicity of it, that red light is something that we can see, and it doesn't penetrate as deep, and infrared can get much more inside us, but that doesn't mean it's harmful in any way. It's just a different way to get things a bit more deeply into the body. And then the UV light and the blue light all penetrate at different levels as well, with the red being the most penetrative.
Right. And I think UV, so many people are afraid of UV light, and UV, we need UVA, is very helpful in terms of mood and focus. And so trying to get people to realize that UVA light, which is right now where I am, it's about an hour after sunrise and about an hour before sunset is when you can get the UVA light. And so even if people can get into more UVA light, as they work their way to getting more exposure outside and some UVB light right now, can you get UVB? Not right now, right?
No, we can't get any more in the UK until March. But yes, like you said, the UVA is really important because it makes thyroid hormone, serotonin, dopamine, and then also it triggers endocannabinoid production. So it basically makes our bodies make all these goodies. And I'm just experimenting at the moment with indoor UV light. So I'll just unblur my background. So can you see I've got one of these kinds of UV sensitive backdrops, and I've got a UV light just here, which is a UVA. So you can bring these inside. However, whenever it comes to trying to trick Mother Nature, from lots of years of biohacking and experimenting with all sorts of things, which we'll probably go into in this, it's too clever for us. So it is okay to have all these lights, and they do have benefits, but there's just something about the real sunlight that just contains stuff that our bodies have had millions of years to adapt to. And as we said right at the beginning of this podcast, quantum biology is still a very new area, and there's a lot we don't understand about how subatomic particles and the wavelengths that we can't see affect the body. So that's what I always say. Don't try and trick Mother Nature, try and work with her or it or him or they. But there are always things that you can bring inside, because like we said, we live in this environment that's extremely industrialized, and humans are very adaptive. So people are panicking. Don't worry, it's not going to kill you. You just need to find workarounds. And because we're all different, some people are really sensitive to EMFs or UV or the sun or cold or hot. So it's about finding which of the things we're going to talk about on a quantum level work for you. And you don't have to do everything, and you can implement one thing every month and move forward really slowly, because sometimes changing lots of things all at once causes a problem, and people think they're intolerant to a UV lamp or a sauna or a certain diet, but it's because they made a sudden change, and that's what the problem, not the change itself. So I think we're probably going to cover lots of things, and just so that people know, there's always a natural way, and then there's always something you can purchase, but to always respect that we can't trick Mother Nature.
Right. Yeah. And you're right about, I think people can get overwhelmed of like, and so just changing. What's also great about quantum, or what's fascinating, is that small changes can have a big impact. And so if people can just start with where they are, if they could start with sunrise, I usually have people start with sunrise, because if you can, that's going to set the circadian rhythm. That's going to set your clock, your biological clocks for the day, the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain, and all of that.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's a massive win-win, because you're basically setting us, you're making a good start. Right. And it motivates you to not mess things up later. But also that it's important to people to bear in mind, there's lots of things you can remove that can be helpful. You don't have to keep adding. And also taking something out, like maybe the other way around to that would be taking out excessive artificial light at the end of the day, because that's going to make a big impact as well, because anything that can improve sleep is going to increase melatonin. And people think melatonin is just a sleep hormone, but it regulates other hormones. It burns body fat. It protects us from cancer because it does the whole molecular trash taking out, and it kills cells that pass their sell-by date. So again, you could always add in something by, like you said, going out in the morning, or you could take away sort of excessive screen use or televisions in the evening. Even if you just took your telly out of your bedroom, that's a big change. Or said, right, I'm not going to have my phone in my bed with me after 8 p.m. So there's all, powerful positive changes, and it's all cumulative, that every now and again you find something that moves the needle massively. And
Right.
people write testimonials about it, but then some people, it's like lots and lots of small changes that they have to make. So they have to be patient. And, what works for one person may not necessarily work for another, because you don't know what order people have done things in. So I call this spatial and temporal summation, that sometimes you do things in an order and you get a big win, or you can do several things all at once, like spatial summation, and get a big win. And the way people blend their habits together are all different. So I always think, take on board what other people say, but don't assume that you're the same as everybody else, that, it's an n = 1. And sometimes it just takes time for the needle to move, because somebody might have spent 30 years eating in a certain way they shouldn't be, or exposing themselves to the wrong kind of light. And it might take longer than, say, somebody that's only been doing it for a couple of years for everything to reset. But no matter what, you're going to get some benefit.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, I love the N of 1 is because every single one of us is unique. And so we've got to do it in our own way. And I keep emphasizing to people, you have to become your own guru here. There's so much information, and we can talk about food and kind of from a quantum perspective, just a little bit about food, because you and I both could probably talk all day about any one of these things. But I think people have to just see what resonates for them and do what's going to feel right for them. But I think it's just confusing for people because there's so much information out there.
Oh, definitely. On the subject of food and quantum biology, I would say if people can eliminate seed oils because they're not addictive, and they've got a huge amount of something called deuterium in it, which from a quantum level is like a big hydrogen. So you can think about it as an adult trying to play on children's toys and they break it, and inside our mitochondria you've got little machines, and these deuteriums are basically like an adult trying to sit on them and breaks them, because the hydrogens are meant to go through. And there's no evidence anywhere that seed oils are addictive. So that would be canola, peanut, basically all vegetable oils. And because, yes, sugar and flour and gluten are very destructive as well. However, they are addictive. So I can appreciate that you can't just ask somebody to quit sugar tomorrow, but so anybody can quit seed oils right now, and that'll be a huge, powerful, positive change. And they won't even notice. There's no reason why your body would crave them. So would you agree there about the seed oils, that if somebody wanted to make one change today and it's not going to disturb their daily life, they're not going to get any cravings, and it's going to make a big difference? Because obviously too much deuterium, too much seed oil is very aging as well.
Yes, 100%. I think the seed oils, it turns out, the studies that are coming out of Australia about seed oils, I don't see it as much in the US. You might in the UK have better information. I think there's a lot of money tied to these seed oils. And so I think it's harder to find the information here. But yes, I think seed oils, I think it's interesting that they're not addictive. So that's just a great point. That's always why I like talking to you, Sarah, because you bring up these points where I'm like, oh, right. Like I know seed oils are bad, but it's an easier one for people to hit because it's not addictive, because it may take them some time to give up some of these other addictive kinds of substances.
Yeah, definitely. And also people who are older, they would have been brought up on lard and butter anyway. And when it comes to addictions, whatever you got exposed to first, that's the hardest addiction to kick. So with me, I got into artificial sweeteners before I got into all kinds of other things that I shouldn't have, which we can talk about or not. But that's the last thing that you know, I remember when we last had a conversation, you really rammed home about their neurotoxic. And I know all of this, I'm a biochemist, but I still like Monster and Red Bull and stuff like that. And I think every time I go to like drink it, I always remember what you said. But when I was thinking about it objectively, I thought, I used to drink loads of Diet Tangos when I was in high school, and everything else I've like given up, all different things, because there's slightly different ways you would approach substances versus food. But I still think whatever you get into first is what you find the most difficult to kick later. But I firmly believe you can give up anything that you want under the right circumstances, and not to listen to anybody that says, oh, I've got an addictive personality. Oh, you're always going to be an addict, because I don't believe that biochemistry is quite forgetful if you can play with it properly. But it is definitely what you started early. It is going to be the hardest to kick. And I think for people who are brought up on butter and stuff like that, giving up seed oils will be really easy for them. But I can't speak for them and sugar addiction, because it does vary from age group to age group. But I have noticed that people who got into sugar really young really struggle with it. And also, if you're an obese or an overweight child around the age of 5 or 6, it's going to have impacted your leptin receptors, which we may talk about later, that it does make it harder, but it's not impossible. That's why, you know, with children and things, I never buy children, even my niece and nephew or my own, any sweets, because I'm not doing them any justice. But the happy ending to that is people who have been an obese child or whatever, you can sort it all out later. It's just going to be a little bit harder, but not to think, oh, I'm going to be like this forever. You just, as you say, once we start to unpick the biochemistry and the biology and leptin and circadian rhythms, it gives hope to people who think, oh no, I'm just stuck like this.
Yes. So much of what you just said, I want to unpack, and I'm like, mine's a hard time, because I'm like, oh, we've got so much that we could unpack. Because I really would love to hear more about just all your thoughts on addiction. And when you said artificial sweetener, I was completely addicted to Diet Coke in high school. I drank more Diet Coke than anything. And like a 6-pack a day kind of girl. Oh, wow. And so, yeah.
Oh no, the thing is, I feel better now about my one Red Bull every couple of days or a week, or I'll go for ages without it. But I think when we had our last conversation, that was a real kick in the face. This is not, and you know, get rid of this and don't let your clients have it either.
Right. Yeah. I really don't mess with it now, because I think if you're doing any artificial stuff, it's just going to get in the way. It's got to go. It may take you 5 years to get rid of it. I realized sometimes, you know, and you're spreading it out. Now it's once a month or whatever it is. But yeah, it's a neurotoxin. So it's got to go. And the seed oils, yeah, they got to go. You know, they've got to go. So at any point, if you can let those go, that's helpful. And then from there, I mean, I learned from you that we get more electrons from fat. And I was like, wait a minute, is that why a lower carb, higher fat, whether it's ketogenic, you know, but more of a whole foods ketogenic diet, is that why so many people are having success there? Not just, I mean, we can dig into the ketosis part of it, but is it really that they're actually getting their bodies able to utilize the electrons from the fat in the food?
Yeah, well, I think it's because, first of all, the way that fat enters the electron transport chain, it goes into complex 2, and complex 1 and 1 leaks a bit. So it goes in and it goes straight through, and you make energy, exclusion zone water, infrared, light very quickly. Whereas if you use sugar as a fuel, it goes from complex 1, which leaks a bit, and then down the electron transport chains. But this is really important for people to understand that it's like a fireworks show, that when fat goes in, it's just like the middle of the fireworks, where it's not too crazy and it's quite enjoyable. But when you have glucose going in, it's like throwing paper on the fire. It goes woof, or the fireworks at the end of the show, because this leaky complex sets off a load of fireworks, which sort of warns the cell, oh, you know, there's a problem. And then when this goes off, you start to attract the immune system and all sorts. So most of the time you want to be burning fat. But for people who accidentally fall off the keto or need to stop it every time they have a period, it is completely okay to add seasonal and local carbohydrates in to burn glucose, because sometimes you need this big fireworks show to go off, just to remind your mitochondria in your body to come and have a look and to check that everything's all right. But I think fundamentally, there are lots of studies about the ketones themselves having beneficial effects, like Richard Veach, who worked on them. He's like a really famous biochemist. We won't go into nerd mode, but he thinks it's all about the ketones, whereas I think it's all about the fact we put more electrons in, and that's like money for the cell, which means more exclusion zone water comes out, more ATP and more infrared. So back to what we were talking about with infrared, you can make your own infrared inside your cells if you want. So you don't need to go outside, and you don't need to buy a panel. Obviously, going outside is important, but you can make your own. And then when it comes to exclusion zone water, the reason it's so important is it's like correct hydration inside the cell, and the exclusion zone water acts like a buffer for mercury or heavy metals or EMF. So it's like a protective coating. It also can arrange itself into like a battery. So it's extra energy for us. And it's also a communication highway. So for people that are interested in mind, body, and, sixth senses and communication through the body, fascia and all of that, the exclusion zone water is massive in that, and the mitochondria make it. And the people that work in the energy medicine area have known this for ages, because I trained in Bowen therapy and myofascial release, and people were talking about this sort of 10 years ago. And there's a book, I can't remember the name, something like water everywhere, but I'm still dehydrated or thirsty. So from a quantum view, we can get our own internal energy, not just from ATP, which is what the mitochondria make. And obviously we need that because we want to survive, we want to thrive, not survive. But this exclusion zone water also can act like a battery and a buffer and all sorts as well. So that's where I always say to people, if somebody's really inflamed or struggling, the best place to start is a ketogenic diet, because it's not some silly fad to do with weight loss. It's got a medical use, and you don't have to do it forever. It's just like we were just talking about, that there are ways that you can come off it or do it seasonally. But I think it's something to massively consider if you're really struggling, because it excludes lots of foods we shouldn't be eating anyway. And it helps people's bodies to remember how to burn fat and their own body fat, because a lot of people I come across who are perimenopausal or postmenopausal, probably the same as you, they're doing everything right, but for some reason their body seems to do absolutely everything to not use fat, and it's like forgotten. So that's where the ketogenic diet can be really helpful, because you basically force your body to use fat, and then it remembers, oh yes, I remember how to burn this stuff, and then it'll start working on your own body fat. But I think in this podcast we'll probably get into other ways to get the body to burn fat, like cold therapy. That can be a way to jump start it as well.
Yeah, because I want you to talk a little bit about that, leptin resistance and cold therapy, because you're brilliant there. I just want to point out the exclusion zone water. I'm so glad that you brought it back to that, because it's so important. And I think what people are like, wait, this is water that I make in my body, and it's not like the water we drink. It's not the liquidy. It's more of a crystalline, like gel-like, right? And it's everywhere. It's everywhere in the body. And so this quantum coherence and the quantum communication is faster than chemicals. So this is really exciting, and we could geek out on it here, but what people really need to understand is that we want to be making sure that the right inputs go in. And if we are going to biohack, that we're doing that thoughtfully and seeing how it works for us, and not overriding Mother Nature. Obviously, we want to be in Mother Nature. And I completely agree with you that a ketogenic diet is a really great place for people, not necessarily to start. Some people have got to do some other things first. I think just eating real food and trying to get off the processed crap, and then the seed oils is a better place. But we are right now in winter, or approaching winter, in many places in the United States and in the UK. So it's a good time to try ketogenic diet if they feel like that would be helpful for them, that there's some really good use for that. The people that I see that don't do, I don't recommend whole food ketogenic, are people who really struggle with eating disorders and particularly, well, restrictive eating disorders, because it can be super helpful in binge eating disorders, but not for anorexia or for restrictive eating. Is there any other caution that you usually have around that?
Actually, the person that trained me in ketogenic diets, Beth Zupek-Kania and Denise Potter, Beth specializes in anorexia. So she's kind of dispelled that myth.
Ooh, okay.
She's got lots of people who it has helped, because back to that, it's all to do with how you set the goal. Because if you're setting a goal to get out of pain or make a certain amount of ketones, and it's got nothing to do with weight or size or anything, you can do medical ketogenic diets with people with anorexia, but I think it just depends where they're at. But I would agree, if you're not comfortable with it or have never had an eating disorder yourself and you don't understand what goes on in somebody's head, it can be a bit frightening. But I think it's also to do with they're indoctrinated into fat being bad, and it can take a long time to unlearn that. And that's the key thing that people do wrong with the ketogenic diet, is either eating too many calories or eating not enough fat and too much protein. So yes, it's all down to how well you know the person and where they are with their anorexia, because there's all different stages of it. But I agree with you, it can be really, really helpful for binge eating. Although I think with binge eating and anything else that involves addiction and neurotransmitters, I would always go for the circadian rhythm first, because we've got the serotonin and dopamine pathway. And it's much easier to take the emphasis away from food completely and say, okay, I accept that you've got an issue with this. Let's just not talk about it for a bit. And let's see if we can talk about, having a sauna in the evening and going out in the morning and doing positive things, which has got nothing to do with food, and maybe reframe the fact that, we're gathering electrons and healing our bodies. And then later we'll come and look at the food. And usually if I've done it that way, it becomes less of a problem. But I agree with you. If somebody's eating a standard American diet, it's better to do paleo first. Yeah. But then it's also better to sort of do the circadian stuff too, because you're going to get some wins there. And it's all about wins. And I think it just depends on the person's goal, because some people I know that, they don't have any issues. If you to look at them, they just feel the terrible shame of bulimia or binge eating, or it's very expensive for them. And other people, it's actually is a weight issue. So I think it depends on why do they want to fix their eating disorder? Because I know there are people who, no matter what we do, they're always going to have some kind of complex or issue about food, and it's going to get triggered every time some emotional event happens. And not that I like to say, oh no, nothing can be fixable, but I think food related issues are so deep rooted, you just have to tread with caution, like you say, and accept that, say, if somebody's got a particular eating problem, when they get upset or somebody annoys them or they lose their job, that is what they're going to go back to. So you have to, catch it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points. And I love hearing all of that, because really for me, the clients that I think have struggled there, it's whether they've had an eating disorder or not, they're afraid of fat, which is a lot of people are afraid of fat because of the way that they brought up. It's just so entrenched in us that fat is bad, that fat will make us gain weight. And it's difficult. Well, it's just challenging to shift that perspective some for people. And I 100% agree that everything you said about places to start and to be sure, and it can be really tricky. And we don't even have to talk about the food, because the circadian rhythms, if we're supporting our circadian rhythms, that's a perfect place to start with people. And I found that leaky gut or intestinal permeability and those issues around leaky gut are really circadian rhythm issues. And
Oh, definitely. And if somebody's got leaky gut, they shouldn't be putting probiotics and things in. That's going to aggravate the whole thing. And it's all about, I think, with the way the gut works, that there's sort of, it's got its own clock and it wants to go to bed before we do. So that's why I don't want to put food in it. And also when we get up in the morning and make our own serotonin is not just a happy chemical. It does expulsive activities like pooing and farting and stuff. So one of the main giveaways with a circadian rhythm and gut problem is constipation or lack of gut mobility. And that can also be with SIBO as well. When the bacteria are growing in the wrong place, it's not their fault. It's probably because the food is sitting around for ages and they're just eating it because it's there. So exactly as you said, when you sort of sort out the circadian side of the gut, a lot of the problems go away. And also once people understand they're not supposed to be eating at 10 o'clock at night, and I know it's really difficult at the moment. I mean, I've managed to do it eventually, not to eat after sunset, and sunset now is 3:45.
Right, it's early.
It's taken me ages, because I won't, we can go into it or not of how I went into a ketogenic diet sort of 20 years ago and why.
Yeah.
But I think it's to do with like that. It took me 20 years to sort of do this, but I think it's when you also limit how often you put food in your gut or shorten your eating window, because eating is inherently inflammatory. That if you're always putting food in, of course, you're going to be annoying the lining. So it just needs time to have a rest.
Exactly.
And fasting can be great for some people, because I was having a conversation with somebody today about sugar addiction, and you can just do a 72-hour fast, and that for probably 75% of people is going to really move the needle for sugar addiction. But that's kind of, it's not easy, but it's not hard. But it also gives the gut a chance to heal, because it regenerates its own lining probably every 2 days. So if you do a 3-day fast, you're guaranteed you've got a nice, fresh, brand new gut lining, so you can sort of start again. It's quite forgiving. It's not like your heart, which your myocytes, you pretty much have the same ones forever. So if you kill some of them with, say, cocaine or something, that's the end of them forever. Whereas your gut, it's always making more. So we've basically got lots of chances.
Yeah, which is just very positive. Yeah, I want to hear whatever you want to share about how you got into ketogenic, any part of your own journey.
Okay. Oh, so mine was because when I was in my early 20s, I had some really terrible mental health problems, and I had to be hospitalized, and I had psychosis and all sorts, and I had to take lots of psychiatric medication, but my mum and dad didn't approve, so they wanted it all stopped. And 20 years ago, it was a massive taboo. So as soon as I got better, this massive carpet came up and everything was shoved under. The carpet was squashed down. I was never allowed to tell anyone in my family. Even the university didn't know, because I was doing my PhD at the time. I never got a diagnosis because I had a psychiatrist who was really anti-medication. So he just said, okay, let's just stop it all and just go back to work and you'll be fine. And it was never sort of ever talked about. And my mum was like, oh, don't tell the rest of the family because I'll be so ashamed and embarrassed. But this is like how it is in the UK. It's different in the States, because you're much more open about diagnoses and medications. So anyway, that's part of how I got really into Pilates and hypnosis and quantum stuff, because it was my own mental health and other things that I was wanting to fix. And then, as people who've ever used psychiatric medication know, it's terrible for weight gain, whether it's SSRIs or antipsychotics. So that's where I got interested in weight issues, because it's something, there's much more to weight than just calories in and calories out. There's all sorts more we can talk about. So that's how I got into a ketogenic diet, because I discovered the Atkins diet when I was I was at uni then, and I didn't have any idea about what it did. I just did it for weight loss, and I just noticed it. I just felt good on it. So I just carried on doing it in my own way. And I only had a book. I didn't have anybody to teach me. And then over the years or the decades, I've added in fasting and got much better at it. I've trained in it and discovered all of the ways to do it and not do it, and dirty keto and carnivore and cyclical keto. So and still I learn something new every day, but it just means I can resonate with people, because I've probably been where they were with food, thought, oh, I'll try something different. Maybe I'll go vegan. So you do that, and then you try the pro-metabolic way of eating. But then I've always got my fingers burnt and then come back to keto again. Because I think I always say to people, it's fine to explore, but always have something you can go back to when things stop working. So you always have, well, this was working, let's just go back to that and start all over again. And that's how it works with me and keto. So I have pretty much done everything. I've even done 4-to-1 ketos, the epilepsy one, thinking, it must be better because it's the most extreme, but it just triggered an episode of hypomania. It was actually this year, and I had to go to a conference. But the thing is, because I'm kind of very used to what goes on in my own head, I can completely ignore anything. So I can easily experiment on myself. And if it triggers some depression or mania, I can, like, it doesn't affect my daily life. I just have to suck it up and just wait for it to go away. But for somebody else who's on medication or a bit prone to depression or anxiety or OCD or mania, they're quite frightened of, oh shit, I've tried this supplement and all of a sudden this has blown up. So it's all about just learning to be comfortable with your own head, because I think most of us live and skate on the boundary between sanity and insanity anyway. And what I've learned over the years, our psyche is really fragile and anything can push you over the edge. I've had clients who've watched a movie and had a psychotic episode at the end because they thought they were the character, or people who've read a book and had a profound life change. So I always think with our mental health that it's very fragile, but the amount of self-talk and complete nonsense that all of us tell ourselves, it's about learning how to ignore it, if that makes sense. So that's another sort of quantum level, and that takes a long time. So I think in your 20s, or people who are in their 20s or 30s that have a bout of mental health for the first time, it's absolutely terrifying. But if you've had loads of it over and over again, you start to be able to think, that's a really interesting, intrusive thought about me kicking my kitten in the head and its head blowing up. Right. And all it's meaning is my brain is showing me my greatest fear. And a lot of people who I've come across with intrusive thoughts, they're extremely violent and they think they're a bad person. And I've said, well, I had that once, and all it was, my brain is showing me this might happen if you do that. And it's nothing, it doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It's just warning you, because the business with my kitten was, I just bought an exercise bike. So obviously if I was going to be pedaling away and the kitten came near, I was going to kick the kitten in the head. And my brain was just imagining this scenario, and all it was doing was showing me my greatest fear. And I think a lot of stuff to do with our minds and psyche is very quantum as well. And maybe if you have your thoughts on this, because I'm very good at like sitting back and observing my thoughts now, and they can do whatever they want. And then I'll just think, okay, right, they've stopped now. I'll connect back with my body. But I think for some people who are experiencing mental health problems, it can be really frightening, and they're really frightened of supplements or light or keto diets or anything, because it will create a biological change and your body is going to do something. It might be nice, it might be weird, it might be helpful, we don't know, but something is going to be different. And some people are so used to things being a certain way, any change can be absolutely terrifying.
That's true. That's really important. Well, I thank you for sharing that too. And I think you're right. Once it can be terrifying for people, and once you start to go, oh, this is my brain doing its thing again. And if you can just contextualize it so that you're like, oh, it's showing me the scariest thing that could happen, and not get too attached there, I think that can be very helpful. And there is a place of just becoming the observer and saying, okay, is that done now? And I can carry on. And I'm interested to hear more about what you're thinking in terms of quantum and that realm of mind, or what's happening there, because I don't know. But I was even thinking when you were talking too about how this might show up in hypnotherapy, or if somebody goes into, I was thinking about, past life. If you say go back to the original experience of that, and somebody goes to another life, whether you were planning to do that or not, like what is going on there, and what do you think that is in terms of quantum? I don't know.
That's a really difficult question, because I have read Dolores Cannon quite a lot. And personally, like, I've been through every different religion, because I started off as a Christian because I wanted to be one. And my mum and dad criticized it and said it's a load of nonsense and this. And then I gradually, as I got older, I explored Christian mysticism, Kabbalah, and Hinduism. And then where I live is very ethnic, so I need to know about Sikhism and Muslims and stuff like that. And I'll, so I've had a massively diverse exposure to all kinds of spiritual things, and one of the common denominators is, including in Christian mysticism, about our soul and spirit just occupying a different body every time. And then if we don't conquer our challenges in one life, they'll just come back to us the next one. And that's why no matter what religion you look at, committing suicide is a terrible thing, whether it's obviously just terrible because of who you upset because you did it, or from a spiritual level, you didn't deal with the challenge, you just gave up and ran away. So back to the quantum thing, I do actually think there's some kind of quantum timeline to do with, first of all, our ancestors and sort of amorphic fields to do with our family timeline, whether it's mitochondrial DNA or just a family sort of morphic resonance that can affect people, or whether it's just us saying, oh, your grandfather was an alcoholic and that's probably why you are, and we just think we are because we were told, or whether there's an actual sort of genuine sort of biological link. That there's loads of different stories that people are interested in who'll know about, sort of past life documentaries, and that humans have existed many times over, like Atlantis, and then what the Egyptians really did. And it's, again, who are we to question? Are we just tapping into some memory that's sort of the collective unconscious, like Carl Jung talks about, and it's somebody else's memory, and we think that we were Queen Victoria, or right. Maybe we actually were. But I think a lot of it is when I work with people, if they think that they have been possessed by something, and then a rabbi and me do an exorcism, that they will improve because we've humored the belief. And how do we know they weren't possessed? That's one of these things about the quantum stuff, that then you can get really, really technical with this, about something called an egregore, which I was asking Catherine Clinton about, where if a lot of people think about something, like you can actually create your own being, like a god, and then more and more people believe in it. So it's a way where thoughts can actually become material. But then people who are very into all of this and say the law of attraction will say, well, of course that happens. I've manifested a million things before, so I've known this for 20 years. So I think it's all about, the question is, are our thoughts confined to our own skulls, or do they project out into the universe? I mean, is it an aura, or, you know, is it something that traverses time and space? And I don't think anybody knows, but people who are spiritual will say, well, absolutely, of course, we don't live in a skull. It's not biological. And, you know, you can contact anybody at any time on this planet because we're all linked because of entanglement theory, that if we were all but one big lump and everything exploded out, we are technically connected to Jupiter and the stars and everybody else. But then for some people, that's just way too weird and esoteric. So I think a lot of it comes down to your own life experiences, what you've read, and what people who you trust tell you. Because I've had so many people who I completely trust, who are nurses, doctors and dentists, swear blind that this patient had an out-of-body experience when they were operating on them. They swear blind that, you know, they have dreams and they're somebody else on another planet. And it's like, who are we to question? And I think it comes down to, if it's not helping somebody, then leave it alone. But if there's something you can do on a quantum timeline or level that may help a blockage, then by all means do it. So I think it's all about, you know, what you're trying to achieve in life. And just as using an example of a client, ages ago, I had this client who you kept binging on peanut butter and jelly, and she didn't even like it. And obviously she gained loads of weight. And when we did our hypnosis, we discovered this entity called Denise had attached to her somehow. And Denise absolutely loved peanut butter and jelly and was using my client's body to feed her biological need. And that was when I thought, actually, maybe I'm wrong, because I used to be very much, oh, this is all nonsense. And after that experience, I thought, well, maybe it is true. And after we asked Denise to go away, the client never ate peanut butter and jelly ever again. So that's what I mean about, you know, who knows why people do things.
Right. But if it's helpful, right?
Yes.
And I'm always that type of person too. If there's something that's helpful, you know, and it gets people, if it moves something that was blocked, I don't care.
Yes.
Really what it was or what it is. So I just think it's all fascinating. And I also, you know, I don't know much about, you know, just the way that these subatomic particles can be both particles and waves. I don't think we understand at all. Like, just by being observed, the behavior of these particles can become waves and back and forth. So I just don't think we understand what's happening on the quantum level completely anyway. So any kind of wacky things could be happening on a quantum level.
But also I think it's just about building rapport with people, because who are we to judge? And then if people feel comfortable telling me that they thought they were an alien in another life and I don't laugh, and this is like a nurse, then they'll be comfortable about telling me, oh, actually buy cakes and then I eat half of it and put it in the bin, and then I come down in the middle of the night and eat the cake out of the bin. And they're so humiliated, and I'm the only person on the planet they've ever told. And I've said, actually, loads of people eat bin cakes, but the only reason they confided in me was because I was totally okay with the original weirdness.
Right.
So yeah, but back to the quantum level, to do with particle and wave duality, with waves and particles, it's the way with light, it's because it can act like bullets and go straight ahead, or it can go around corners. And and it can spread out, so it's both a particle and a wave. But then what people forget is they think we're just matter, but we're a particle and a wave as well. So that's how it all integrates, because really we are just a cloud of atoms moving through space, and we see each other, and you look like you and purple looks like purple because of filters and how we've learned how to make sense of this world. And that's when people sort of start talking about psychedelics and veils and everything. But fundamentally, we look like this because this is how our brains perceive it. But really, on an atomic level, if we could analyze ourselves, we're just a load of atoms moving about. And again, the atoms can go around corners or go straight ahead. So we have a lot in common with light, which is that's back to right at the beginning of our conversation. Why does light affect us so much? It's because, well, we are, and food is light as well. And I think that's back to, I mentioned eating seasonally and locally, and how food isn't just calories and energy, it's information. Like around here, there's loads of apples still here, so I have been eating a few of them, and it's still a ketogenic diet, but it's more carbs than normal. But it's just felt really right to me, because me and the apples live together in Leeds, and my mitochondria are expecting an apple from nearby to remind me where I am, because like I said, our brains constantly need to know what time it is and where am I. And say if I'm eating the apples that are in my garden, like even if I eat a quarter, it's still enough to provide information which reassures my mitochondria, oh yes, you are where you think you are. And anything that confuses the body, in quantum language we'd call it chaos, but in biology language we call it inflammation. So that's why I'm not always, like with keto, I think I shouldn't be really eating avocados, because I don't live where avocados grow, so therefore I don't eat them. Whereas somebody would be like, well, what the hell are you doing eating apples when you're keto? And it's like, well, it's different, because the apple is reassuring everything of my location. And then this leads into a conversation I had with a friend of mine, because I wanted to explore drinking rainwater. And again, it's just because I accidentally left loads of stuff outside. It was a massive, like, Noah's Ark downpour, and I had all this water, and I'd run out of my own water because I don't drink tap water. And I thought, oh no, I'm going to have to drink the rainwater. And I actually felt really good about it, because it'd been sitting out in the sun, and it was obviously very local. So when I drank it, it was structured water. And obviously it agreed with my body, because it was just reinforcing, okay, you are where you are. There's no chaos here. This is all very relaxed and chilled. For people who are thinking, oh my gosh, that's just so weird, you can get your own water and just put it outside for a bit, and the sunlight, which is information, is going to transfer into the water, and then you can drink it, and it just reminds you of your location. Because my friend who's really into water says tap water is traumatized water. And I do agree with her, but on just a general level of biochemistry, tap water is full of medication and fluoride and probably lead if you live near Michigan. And there's all sorts of horrible things in different parts of the country. In the US, there are certain areas that have got super high deuterium. So when it comes to water, you may have come across this as well. I know people are meticulous about their diets, and I've said, what do you drink? Oh, tap water. I'm like, you spend $250 a week on food and you're drinking out of the tap. Mm-hmm. So maybe you want to put your thoughts into, have you ever come across that as well? And it's all back to when people just can't understand why something's not working, and it can be as simple as they're drinking water from the tap, and filtering it through a Brita filter isn't good enough, that the nasties all get through.
I know, which is, sometimes I think it's better, just to get them to start to filter in some way is better than not. But yeah, 100% where you're like, they put so much energy into something and then are, doing something really simple that's
Hmm.
completely negating every good thing that they're doing. But I also really agree with you in terms of seasonal. I've gotten really interested and I'm playing with it myself in terms of looking at food as information and electrons, right? But really local food, at least in season, and not be trying to eat something that comes, I'm not going to eat kiwi that comes from New Zealand because I'm nowhere near New Zealand, even as much as you might love kiwi. It's not, you can soon, because aren't you going to New Zealand?
Yes, yeah, and I am half a New Zealander, but yes, definitely it would confuse the hell out of my mitochondria. But if I'm actually in New Zealand, I can eat them.
Of course. But I wanted to ask you about that because I've been a little curious too about, I think of it as like genetic residue. You used a different word, but that residue of like our ancestors. And I just wonder if there's something even on a soul level, maybe we would call that quantum, I don't know, but something that could be helpful or soothing because your ancestor from ancestors, not even, not hunter gatherer, not all the way back then, but some more recent relatives, there might be something that feels good in your body. And I don't know if that would, or if it's really just about where your feet are planted. We want our mitochondria to not be confused, because that also makes sense to me.
I think in terms of like geolocation and magnetism, it would be better to have seasonal and local, but that's another really important point, because it's back to spirituality, that it's better to just choose whatever your ancestors were, because even though I could be any religion because I'm very adept in all, my ancestors would have been Christians, and I don't agree with the magical mythical side of Christianity. I've grown out of that, but I love Christian mysticism and I'm all right with that. And then if you look at what Christians and monks and everything ate, it's actually quite similar to what I did, because I really like fish, and fish is quite big in Christianity. And then eating a wide variety of meats is okay as well. There's nothing restricted, and you can eat pork as a Christian and anything. And also there's fasting, which does get on with me as long as I don't do it in the morning. So I think back to what your question is, when I look back to what did monks and what did Meister Eckhart or Thomas Aquinas, I know they're not British, but what did they eat? Or and what would traditional sort of medieval British food have been like? What does it match up to? And it's kind of quite similar to what I ended up eating all by myself. And I definitely think, say, if somebody comes from a long line of Muslims, they're just going to feel more comfortable just not eating pork. And if somebody comes from a long line of Hindus, something about them doesn't feel right eating beef. So I think it is worth exploring your heritage, because I think that's a really good question. I don't know the answer. Is there some tandem or quantum memory? Say if somebody comes from a long line of Africans and they move to the UK, are they going to be more all right with Caribbean and African food than I am, just because there's some kind of resonance? And I always think, if in doubt, just test it,
Right.
because it's all back to, something might work for you and I'll try it, but then it doesn't work for me. So it's all about taking on board an idea, trying it and seeing what happens. And this is back to why I mentioned about the mental health quite a lot, that sometimes you do have a weird reaction, and you just have to accept that when you're experimenting, things are going to happen. And change is good, especially if you've got a problem. You may have to sift through several different options to get what you want. But I genuinely don't know. I do know what you mean about the ancestral thing, about people who've come from a particular region and then have decided to live, somewhere else. So I think it's probably, they're going to be like a hybrid, probably.
Right? I feel like that would be, and I think if you've got major health issues, it's always better to start with going local. Like, just get your feet on the earth as much as you can, so that get outside as much as you can, get the light right, and then eat local seasonal. I'm a huge fan of eating of eating food from animals. I'm a big fan of fish because of the DHA, but I think if you start with local and seasonal food, that you're going to be helping your mitochondria out, and then you may experiment as some of your symptoms, or you start to get rid of whatever illnesses you're trying to get rid of, or are we even trying to get rid of them? You're trying to get in harmony, and then you may be able to experiment without issue, I guess.
Oh, you definitely, and I'm a big fan of like recording stuff and making notes, not for an obsessive way, just to see what happens. Because also, just from a socio-economic point of view, it supports your local business if you buy from farms. And also, there's a big hoo-ha in the news at the moment in the UK about that supermarkets make £4 billion worth of profit, and the farmers are making like 5p or 5 cents profit on things. So this has really enraged the nation. So now it's much more willing to go to the farm shop or something local to try and take away from the supermarkets. And then we've got the food miles and pollution, and anybody that eats meat and goes on the internet is going to come under attack from somebody plant-based who's militant eventually. And, you know, politely you can just say, well, you know, look at all those food miles that are on your avocados. And you know, when you don't live somewhere where plants are produced, you don't understand the socioeconomics of production. And there's lots of corruption with avocado production in Mexico, and people have wars over them. And there's lots of awful things that go on in coffee and banana and coconut plantations. And because we don't live there, we don't really understand, because it's all hidden, because all of our news is censored in every country. Like, I can't read your news properly, and people in the States really struggle to find out what's going on. But whereas if you can just go and see your lamb or whatever in a field, or you can go and see your local farmer, or you know which state it came from, at least you can understand on an energetic level, where did it come from? Because this is back to what you're asking. If food is produced in a kind of hateful, harmful way, does that trauma from the food then sort of transfer onto us? And because I mentioned cocaine earlier in a different context, I think, isn't there something like a pint of blood is spilt for every gram of cocaine that gets produced? And that negativity and hate and killing, I think it transfers into the drug. And that's why these illegal drugs are doubly destructive, because you've got all that negative energy attached to them as well. And I think this could potentially happen with food. So this is the quantum sort of view of substances, because inherently cocaine naturally, as the leaves, is a very like healing tea. Right. And it's not bad or evil or nasty. But when we start making it into this powder and killing people on the way, I think the taint, the negativity gets attached to it, which can then transfer into the person. And I'm sure this can happen with food as well.
Sure, absolutely. I'm mindful of our time, because I don't know if you have a few extra, do you have a few extra minutes?
Oh yeah, I do. I've got to make a video. Well, I've got to edit a video, and I've done most of it, and I've got to teach a Pilates class at 7 o'clock. Okay. And then a friend of mine is dropping off something and picking up some methylene blue, and then ex-lodger who I've asked him about 20 times to move his stuff out. I've just put his stuff out in the garden. I've said, don't come in and crash about, because I'm doing something important. So yeah, I've got time. Okay,
but I've got a client at 1:30 my time, but I have a little more time, so we can I could talk to you all day, because this, you know, it's just so much fun to listen and to even think about these things. And it always sort of blows my mind. And I was just sitting here thinking about, you know, I think I've felt more comfortable, like meat just feels really good in my body. And I've had a lot of healing, and the plants were actually causing me problems. And it was I just couldn't believe that was happening. I couldn't believe that plants could possibly be the problem. And I was thinking it was the oxalates and the, you know, all of the anti-nutrients in it. But I wonder if it was actually that I wasn't maybe eating locally, or maybe even not even seasonally, but also just the energetics of how it was made. Oh, I was going to sneeze, so it must be true. But you know, like when you're talking about it, I was like, I might have just been picking up energetically something, whatever that was. And it had nothing to do with the anti-nutrients in the plants. It just...
Oh, yeah, I suppose for people who are not familiar with it, it's not just gluten that's harmful. It's like lectins, which can interfere with your insulin receptors, and they can be very problematic for joints. Lots of the plant's compounds steal minerals. So it might be that they were mineral depleting you, that they don't really want to be eaten anyway. And the seeds are very well defended. So on one level, that they are inflammatory because they may have another animal in mind that they want to be eaten by. Also, the other problem with plants is, and it's the same here, that there's loopholes in the law about organic. So you can spray all sorts on organic crops, including bacteria, bacillus, I can't remember its second name, but you can put bacteria on crops here because they're meant to be an insecticide, but the public doesn't know that. Then in the US, you've got much more of a glyphosate problem than we have. So it might have just been that you're eating pesticides. And also there's a whole load of stuff on the plants that there's a loophole in the law and nobody has to declare. I think Bordeaux mixture is loads of copper sulfate, and you're allowed to throw that all over your crops anywhere. And then also, like you said, that it could have been that the plants were coming from all over the world and just creating general chaos.
Right.
And it's all back to the fat indoctrination that we've been misinformed and by whoever, Mr. Kellogg's, Mr. Quaker, and all of the very big cereal companies, that plants are, what we're meant to be eating. But then, we're a sort of obligate carnivore anyway. And yes, we can eat plants, but I think it's all back to, if you grow your own stuff in the garden and have an allotment, people swear by that, and you kind of know everything about your plant. You know what you put on it, and it lives in the same place as you do. So I have noticed that people who just grow their own are fine, and when you start shipping in exotic, unusual things, you don't know anything about them. That's the same with anything, supplements, whatever, that you have to know everything's history. And if you grew your own tomatoes, you know everything about them. So I think you're right there. So it's like a safe bet. If in doubt, then leave it out. And if, like with people, they get quite angry at me that when they've got all these problems, and say, why don't you just do carnivore? Because it's very simple. It's like, we'll just eat meat. Yes, but and it's like, look, just try it and see what happens. And you've probably had the same with people. They've objected and then found it so simple, and it's actually got rid of the problems. And then you can start to add things back in one at a time and see who was the culprit, because it might have been the fruit, it might have been the avocado, it might have been the nuts, it might have been the dairy. We don't know. It can be anything.
Right. That's exactly how I feel. And that's personally what happened for me. I just went carnivore because I was so frustrated. And I thought, I'll just try this. It's not one of the only things I hadn't tried. Right. And then it's so simple and so many things started improving. You're like, this can't be right. Like, I've been told my whole life, I've been teaching people about, eating rainbow and colors and eating all the plants. And I was like, oh, okay. But it's been so helpful. Personally, but I'm just sitting here thinking through a lot of it. So what else? We didn't talk a lot about the biohacking. So I don't know, with the time we have left, what do you feel like is most helpful that you want to share with people about healing or information that is not well known, whatever kind of comes up for you?
Oh, I think it depends, like, would it be like electronics, or would it be items, or would it be supplements? Because I'm a big fan of mushrooms, like any kind, but medicinal mushrooms can be really helpful because they're very closely related to us and they have an immune system as well, whereas plants are very distinct from us evolutionarily. So it makes much more sense for people who love supplements to go down the medicinal mushroom route. I'm not talking about like psychedelic mushrooms or anything. That's a whole other world. Yeah. About, that's very interesting. And it's one of these things that, yes, of course it works, but you've still got to do something sustainable. So that would be, I don't know how well your audience or adept they are with medicinal mushrooms, but it's something that it's really, I've had a lot of joy with them. But then I suppose if you were talking about devices, my latest thing that I tried was a magnetic mattress, and it's not something that I lie on it and then anything metallic like sticks to me. It's a way of creating direct current when I'm sleeping. And I didn't buy the Magnetico, the expensive one in the US, because it weighs about 52 pounds, and I thought the shipping's going to be insane, and what if it gets lost? So I bought a British one that they said, oh, developed in America, and they'd completely copied it. And I actually found massive value in this magnetic mattress. And I haven't got the full shebang, the full one. And I've only got, like, I suppose it would be the $400 version. And I was really pleased with it. So is that the kind of biohacking angle you wanted to go on? Or did you want to talk about like hormone replacements, or, you know, or what?
I think most people that I mean, I'm really interested to hear about medicinal mushrooms, especially because it's brought you a lot of joy. What brings you joy, I think, is helpful for people to, and I think people are really interested in, you know, methylene blue, red light panel, like the medicinal mushrooms, those kinds of things.
Oh, right. Okay. So things that wouldn't hurt people. Well, on the medicinal mushroom front, we've got lion's mane, that's for brain, and then reishi, which would be for gut and calming because it binds to GABA receptors, and reishi can give people interesting dreams. Then chaga can be helpful. There's studies on all of these you can look up, and chaga is like a very powerful antioxidant, and people use it against cancer, same as turkey tail mushroom, because the Japanese are very into this. And then maitake is sort of a natural detox tonic because it's like a liver and kidney stimulator. So it's a way for people to detox slowly, because this is a very quantum thing, is if you create the right environment, as in redox, before you detox, your body will just do it all by itself. You don't need to get chelation or spend like 10 grand on going to Germany and having this weird sort of treatment that heats you up from the inside. You can do it all yourself. So that's where that maitake mushroom would be helpful, because it just happens slowly. Then we've got things like shilajit, which is this sort of resinous compound that comes out of mountains in Siberia and Tibet and stuff like that. And it was traditionally used when people were going up the mountain. It would protect them from altitude sickness, and monks used to eat shilajit because they used to live in the mountains and pray and meditate in all manners of weather. And shilajit contains fulvic acid, and fulvic acid is very interesting because it'll deliver a mineral to you, and in exchange it can take a nasty thing like a mercury or a cadmium, and then the way detox works is the fulvic acid will go into your gut and you just poo it out. But also shilajit contains C60 or fullerene, and that's like a buckyball. It looks like a ball. And in biochemistry, we use fullerene or buckyballs. We put things inside them and then deliver it. But people can just eat the buckyball on its own because it just delivers a lot of electrons. And in shilajit, there's an amount of C60, along with other interesting compounds. And with shilajit, if you look in PubMed, there's loads of studies on it. So it's not things we're just inventing and pulling out of the air. And it's one of these things, it's like methylene blue. It helps a massive variety of illnesses because it's working at the level of the mitochondria by providing electrons. So this would be shilajit. And then shilajit is helping to detox, again, which is a burden on us. And then methylene blue helps the flow of electrons. It's like it can substitute or help them along the way. And as soon as you're working right at the heart of something, like mitochondrial disease is 85% of our illnesses. So when you use things like C60, shilajit, or methylene blue, you're working right at your molecular batteries. So you're making more energy, making more exclusion zone water, making more infrared, back to what we've been talking about. And I think that's why these are so powerful. And obviously, if you took far too much, you're going to have an unpleasant time, but they're very cheap and you don't need very much. Like methylene blue is very inexpensive and you need maybe 10 milligrams or 50 milligrams to get started. So it's extremely cheap. You don't need to have methylene IV, which I've seen people having. That's just going to excess. And then when you buy shilajit, it's like a black stuff in a pot. And you scoop out about a grain of rice size and put it in your tea or coffee. So it'll just last you forever. and that's really cheap as well. And fullerine's a bit expensive, but then again, everybody has different budgets, so you know, we have to cater for people that want to spend a lot of money versus those who don't have a lot of money.
Right. And I'm guessing quality. So I'm thinking, well, these are fungi, these mushrooms, and so I don't know how important.
Oh yes, it goes back to the mushrooms. I think it's just about, like we've been talking, discovering where do they originate from and buying from a reputable company. Like the problem is, in the UK, we just use Kappa Health because they're from Finland, and I know them personally and I know everything about them, but it's just a right pain for Canada and the US. But I've got a feeling that they actually supply in, because I know they supply about 2/3 of the world, so that it's a white label. So with the medicinal mushrooms, I would just buy from a specialist. Don't buy from something like bulk supplements or something where there's lots. There will be in Canada and the US shops and places that's just specialize in methylene blue, medicinal mushrooms, or whatever, sometimes people at places that sell CBD do it, but it would be a specialist place. Don't buy it on Amazon or bulk or anywhere like that. I would look, you know.
Right, exactly.
And then with methylene blue, you just need to have UPS grade.
Right.
And I think people use Compass Labs in the US or Mito Labs,
Yeah.
or you can just buy your own from a company, because they have to sell you what they say they're selling you. Because I just bought from a company here, because you just buy, you know, it has all the grades laid out, and you say, I want that one, I pay my money, and you get sent it. And I think the thing about methylene blue is, because the dose is so low, even if it was contaminated, the amount of methylene blue is going to be 1,000 to 1 to your contaminant. And every single compound that even you work with in a lab, every single pharmaceutical, everything we take isn't pure. We just don't talk about it. So I think there's a bit of an over fuss about methylene blue, because, you know, it's going to be 99% pure, and that's the best you're going to get. Whereas we don't know whether our Zoloft or our olanzapine or our Tylenol or whatever, or our benzodiazepine, that's probably only 99% or 95% pure, but nobody says anything.
Nobody's worried about that. Yeah. And I've been taking the methylene blue too, and I think I'm interested to hear your thoughts. I only have a couple more minutes, so I want to pick your brain just a little bit about how long. Like, you told us about dosing. I mean, and that's small amounts, but how long are you thinking? Like, I was even thinking last night, how long am I going to be taking methylene blue? Because I like it, but I already felt really good before I started taking it. So
Oh yeah, that's a really good question, because this is back to the medicinal mushrooms, the Shilajit and the C60. I think, and CBD, anything, you should always have a supplement break, and I just do it every 4 weeks. So whatever it is that I'm experimenting with, I'll always only do a month. And then stop, because sometimes, like you say, you stop and whatever it's done, it's helped you, and your body's got better or detoxed, or you've grown more mitochondria or whatever, and you don't need it anymore. But also, because methylene blue does all sorts of other things, like it's a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, it's an antioxidant, and everything in the body just gets sensitized. So the more, it's like shouting at people, they just stop listening to you after a while. And this is the same with all supplements. You have to stop just to let all of your receptors sort of get sensitive again, because it's just a waste of money otherwise. And this is not just for methylene blue, it's for everything. And with the medicinal mushrooms, you have to stop anyway, because you don't want to get wild liver function. And CBD will also give people wild liver function if they just keep taking it, but it just stops working properly. So it just becomes a waste of money as well. So I would just say a month to 6 weeks. I think with somebody who's got something quite serious, you know, like chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia, that they might take it and feel really good, stop taking it and feel terrible again. So that will be an example of, okay, well, let's just go back on again while we get to the root cause of what this is. And that's how it would work. So I suppose with you and me, like, I feel good most of the time, and there's only so good that I can feel, if that makes sense. So I just like do it as and when, and then again, just have a break from it.
Awesome. Yeah, that's my take too. Really, with anything, you're right. So that is amazing. I loved being able to talk with you, Sarah, and I know you're about to go on a big trip. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and to go into some quantum. I think we could do a part 2 for sure when you get back.
Oh, definitely. It's been a delight to talk to you, because I think something that Catherine Clinton always emphasizes is it's about having a quantum community of like-minded people, whether we're connected locally or remotely. It just gives us that wonderful feeling of being part of something, which we are because of the entanglement theory. And sometimes we just think we're this entity all on our own, and just the reassurance of like-minded people in amongst all the noise from the social media. It's just nice to have kindred spirits or people with a common way of thinking to talk to, because it's all to do with the heart rate variability, that if we feel safe and valued and listened to, it's really good for our own biology. So yeah, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, because obviously, like, I get the same out of it in our own little community, and the same with like clients and stuff who are all open-minded and on the same journey.
Yes. Yes. So absolute pleasure.